We have a few questions here and got a little bit of time to go through these. One of your last slides there, Jimmy was talking about finding funding. We had a question here from one of the attendees about federal funds. Have you used federal funds for any of your bridge preservation projects?
When I was with the state of New Mexico, we used federal funding for some of our preservation. I know if you, any of the procurement you do and that sort of thing, you have to work through the process. Very important that you've got to work through the various agencies. If you're with a local agency, no doubt you'd have to work through your state, and then from there, state agency, and then they would work with the feds. But yeah, it can be, federal funding is nice, but it can be a lot of effort to keep all the paperwork and to track everything and to get just the accounting and documentation is.
And that was kind of the follow-up to that question was, how do you get past the PE environmental costs, exceeding the preservation costs? I didn't know if you had any wisdom on there from at least from your experience maybe in New Mexico, or maybe Travis can speak to that as well from Oregon.
Well, I know with Maricopa County, we still have to work through the environmental process. We have an environmental staff, and we're always working with them on, yeah, we have to do burrowing owl surveys, and we have to check the existing paints and for lead, and we have to check the existing concretes for asbestos, and yeah, we're always having to work through the environmental process.
So that is a big issue, the use of federal funds. I do know that there are some processes that can go through where you can get like a programmatic exception where you focus in on certain activities that aren't going to trigger a lot of those processes and get a letter together with your state federal engineer. That is something that this case study is going to really look at, is trying to highlight the mechanisms that are barriers for doing that and how to do it well. For in Oregon, a lot of our federally funded preventative maintenance is going to be very large scale projects. So cathodic protection, recoding the structure, the things where that overhead gets kind of minimized.
Not to leave you out, Mel, how do you fund your bridge preservation program? Is it with federal funds or local funds or state funds?
Right now for us, it is all local funded. Sometimes one of the things we've actually talked about this year is because I think we have a few that we're probably going to have to do a little more of that heavier type of rehabilitation, and we're talking about looking at possibly one of the calls for community crossings, or actually looking for, we were actually discussing, because the federal call is open right now, we were actually talking about that for one of our bridges. And we're still kind of, because you've got to have council approval, some of those things are issues that you have to think about working through as well, because it's one thing for you to have it in your bucket, if you will, or in your pot, and then just go, well, I'm going to prioritize this, 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 and this. But it's another thing for you to go, well, I have to not only present to this group, but I have to justify, as what Jimmy was saying, and you can't take no for an answer. And so you have to weigh those things out. And for us, we've been lucky. We've been able to do it with the local funds right now.
One of the questions that we had for you, Mel, was how many bridges you have in your county? I think you mentioned that. Did you say 87?
We do. We actually acquired a couple of new bridges due to a road relinquishment. We had 70, let me see, had 78 and we acquired 9. So we've got like 87.
And then the other part of that question was, what is your budget for bridge preservation, and has it grown over the last couple of years? I know you mentioned you're going from 2 barrels to 4 barrels, but
how we normally do it is what I get in my fund annually is I get approximately, because it's broke down a lot, I get about $60,000. There's a 50 for, it's called Cume Bridge, then I have 3,000 for concrete, there's so much for steel pipes, but it's all under our bridge bucket, if you will.
Gotcha.
What we try to do is, again, now we have a Cume Bridge fund that actually has, I think it has at this point in time, I want to say it has a few $100,000 in it that we've tried to keep, in the bank, if you will. So what we try to do is, that's why we try to annually see what we're going to do as far as maintenance. And for us, one of those, not doing that worst first, but doing that preservation, that bridge ceiling, the deck ceiling, I just can't say enough about it. It's just such a cheap, and I don't mean that in a bad way, it's such a cheap, good thing for you to be able to do. We spend Okay, so the initial setup was about $2,500 for the hoses, and it's about $1,200 give or take for the product. Well, okay, if I can get 10 bridges for 2 barrels, so that's $2,400, and I'm going to continue to use the hoses and the seal rods. It's a no-brainer for me. I don't have to do, I'm not an engineer, so numbers they don't come quickly to me, you know? So it's really simple.
Yeah, but even if you have to use a contractor, that kind of work is very inexpensive.
Exactly. I agree with you 100%, Jimmy. And I'm just lucky that I have a crew of the two are willing to almost try anything. And they're willing to do it. And like I said, we've got a Pat, and Pat is very willing to help us and to help put us in contact with people that are willing to help us, like Tim, who is the gentleman from Advanced Chemical, that actually helped us with the product to begin with.
Yeah, Mel, cleaning out the debris out of the connections.
I did it this year. We just did it again this year. So we did clean the trusses out. I was on the truss. I did do it. So
I know there was some apprehension to that when we were talking about that. Question for you, Jimmy. Can you talk a little bit maybe more how you use your GIS for your bridge maintenance management?
Presently, our GIS is used just to identify, I don't know, we can show our roads, we can show our bridges, we can show our drainage features, we can turn on the various aerials so we can see what's going on. But in the background, we actually have asset management separate systems that feed data into that GIS system. Yeah, we've just started a new one for all of our culverts, and then our larger culverts and our smaller bridges. And then of course our bridge program, when we use our NBI bridge inspection database, and we actually feed data into that GIS system. So that's where it gets some of the properties that are available to us in that GIS system.
Yeah, I know we're trying to do that a lot more here in Indiana, at least utilizing that GIS is a great tool for the asset management. Question I had for you, Jimmy, was in your bridge maintenance program, do you do any of the work in-house, or is it all through that, what would you call it, the job order contracts?
Yeah, we've had some success with our maintenance groups taking care of some of the erosion and some of the debris clearing and some of that. But for the most part, our maintenance people, they say, yeah, we'd like to start doing some of that work, but I don't know, we just can't ever seem, they just never get it on their schedules to actually do a demo project or anything like that. And so we've ended up just contracting it all out. We've tried to work with our maintenance staff, but they haven't been real stable either. We've had a lot of people come, they work for the county for a while, and then they leave, and then it's somebody else. And you've got to have a stable workforce to be able to do that kind of work.
Question for any of the three panelists here. Are any three of you using any bridge management systems to help optimize the scenarios and utilizing the budget to sustain the condition ratings?
I can speak for Oregon. So in Oregon, we do use BRM for managing a lot of our information. However, we are actively managing the deterioration of our infrastructure. Our replacements have been deferred for so long. We've been doing quite well at preservation to keeping existing bridges in place, that at this point, we unfortunately are highly reactionary. So a lot of it is fixing the defects that you need to fix, and then programming as much preservation on the back end of it. And so, no, we haven't really relied heavily on prioritizing work that way.
Background has been mainly just looking at the bridges that are in fair condition and saying, hey, what can we do to move those up to good condition? And then we generally will try to get a list and a preliminary scope of work on the various bridges and what it would take to change their condition. And then we just year from year, we decide what work we're going to do.
Heavily on our vendor or our contractor at the time who's doing our inspections, and we ask them to give us a priority list is what we ask them for. And again, kind of like that good, fair, poor, good, medium, and then worse. And so the worst would be the higher, at that point in time would be the higher priority.
Just one more final question before I think we run out of time. Biggest obstacles to starting a bridge preservation program? Anything that you guys can share, and how did you overcome that?
I said it in my presentation and I'll say it again. It's not always a strategy, it's the culture. So I think you have to have the mindset. And I think what has helped us, honestly, has been those things like LCHAP, the bridge preservation conferences, these kind of conferences to get that mindset in there. So that's the culture that you want to build.
Yeah, just got to keep talking. You can spend a little bit now or a lot later. And what, you just got to talk to the decision makers and ask them, what do you really want? Like I say, we can do a little bit now and we can prolong the life of these structures, or we can just wait till they fall apart and then you're going to have to buy a new bridge or whatever. And it's very difficult to buy, to rebuild new.
And I would say it's important to have a transportation asset management plan, that TAMP, that actually puts weight towards keeping a certain number of good bridges. A lot of the TAMPs that are out there focus on a certain number of keeping your poor bridges below a certain number, but that doesn't necessarily encourage preservation. And so getting a selection process that prioritizes preservation as part of it. I know in Oregon, I'd like to see us try and work towards carving out a certain level of funding that makes its way to the locals for selection that is preservation only, right? So make that funds available so it's no longer competing directly for worst first replacements.
Clyde, one final question. Where's a good place to start? I know, Mel, you kind of mentioned about penetrating concrete sealers in your county, but any other follow-up to that, or Jimmy or Travis, from your experience? If Fresh County never really taken on a proactive maintenance program, where's a good place to start?
Well, you can't go wrong with deck sealing. Every place I've looked, you can always find cracks in bridge decks, and sealing them can be relatively easy to do. It's just gotta get started with that, and then leaky expansion joints cost this nation a lot of money.
That's something we're working on this year. As a matter of fact, our guys actually did their own research. They found a product they liked, Sikaflex. It's self-leveling, and they're actually using that on some of our smaller joints. So, and they love it right now. And what they said they wanted to do is kind of wait a little bit and see how it does over time. And it's good for us as leaders and managers to give our staff and our crews the ability to do that. And I think that sometimes we get so boxed in because we think we've got to do it this way. I tell you, the good thing about me is that I didn't know how to do it, so I didn't have a box. And that helped me. That really helped me a lot. And then I found the right people to guide me along, but not having that box is very helpful.
Well, and it's so important to let the product go for a whole season. We had a gentleman in northern New Mexico that loved the asphalt plug joint. It's just you put down a steel plate and you put in some elastomeric sort of asphalt material over it. And he put some of those in one summer, and he like, this is the greatest product. I'm going to do those from now on. That's all I'm going to use. Well, it goes through one winter where they have some nights at 20 below and the trucks beat those things. And that asphalt plug joints just turned brittle and they just fell apart. And so then the next spring, I'm never putting another one of those joints in again. So it's important that you see what works for you, and different people have, there's different environments out there, and what might work real good in one environment may not work so good somewhere else.
And I'll just make another plug there for TSP2. If you're a local agency who hasn't been involved in this program, this is exactly some of the benefits to coming to the conferences and, talking to some of your fellow bridge owners and maintenance bridge workers and industry folks, and learning what those technology and solutions are. Travis, any final comment from you?
No, I agree wholeheartedly. Don't go through all the trial and errors on your own. Ask others. There are people that have gone through the same scenarios in similar environments and can really help you get a leg up on the game. And the TSP2 partnership is a very valuable resource to do that.
Well, thanks again to Jimmy, Mel, and Travis. I learned a lot. Great presentations. I'm sure everybody else did as well. A lot of good comments coming in on the comment section. So thanks again, guys.
The preceding was produced by the National Center for Pavement Preservation. More information can be found on the web at pavementpreservation.org. Additional support provided by Michigan State University.